The vault door was sealed. The magnetic locks showed no signs of tampering. But when the security guard swung it open that Sunday morning, he found only emptiness, where over $100 million in diamonds should have been. The 123 safety deposit boxes inside the Antwerp Diamond Center had been cleaned out. No alarms had sounded. There were no broken windows, no forced doors. It was as if the gems had simply evaporated. For the security team, the disbelief quickly turned to a cold, dawning horror. They were looking at a ghost heist. This was the heart of the global diamond trade, a building so secure it was considered a modern-day Fort Knox. The Antwerp Diamond Center wasn't just a building, it was a fortress within a fortress, located in a district patrolled by police with submachine guns. Dealers from around the world paid premium rates for these safety deposit boxes, trusting that their fortunes were protected by a multi-layered security system that was supposed to be impenetrable. The central question, the one that would haunt investigators and fascinate the world, was simple. How do you break the unbreakable? The answer would come from a crew who believed they had found a way to outsmart perfection itself. The man at the center of this audacious plan was Leonardo Notarbartolo. He was the perfect frontman, sophisticated and charming, with a legitimate cover as a diamond merchant that granted him full access to the Diamond Center. The irony was almost poetic. His real business was diamonds, just not in the way his fellow traders assumed. Notarbartolo was a graduate of what law enforcement called the School of Turin, a loose network of Italian thieves renowned for their technical skill and meticulous planning. This wasn't a gang of brash thugs. It was a professional operation. For 2 years, Notarbartolo conducted a reconnaissance mission from the inside. He rented an office, he became a familiar face, and he took notes on everything. He studied the guards' routines, the cleaning schedules, and most importantly, the precise mechanics of the security systems. His goal wasn't just to steal, it was to perform a surgical strike that would leave no trace. Assembling the crew was like casting for a heist movie, with each member bringing a specific, non-overlapping skill set. There was the lockpicker, the electronics expert, the driver. They were specialists, and the Diamond Center was their ultimate test. The planning phase was over. It was time to move from theory to execution. Their most critical discovery during those 2 years of observation wasn't a flaw in the technology, but a flaw in human routine. They found the crack in the Diamond Fortress's armor during the weekend. From Friday evening to Sunday morning, the Diamond Center transformed. The bustling hive of dealers vanished, observing the Jewish Sabbath, and with them went the intense scrutiny. The security remained, but it became more predictable, more relaxed. This created a perfect 48-hour window of opportunity. The crew planned their entry for a Friday night, giving them until Sunday morning to complete the job without interruption. They prepared for a maximum pressure operation, knowing they would be working against the clock deep inside the lion's den. Every minute would count. Their entire strategy hinged on exploiting this weekly lapse in human vigilance, a simple crack that the architects of the multi-million-dollar security system had never considered. With the timing set, they now faced the first and most immediate physical challenge, getting past the building's electronic sentries. The first line of electronic defense was a comprehensive network of light and motion sensors. These weren't your standard store-bought alarms. They created an invisible latticework of infrared beams throughout the hallways. The slightest interruption would trigger a silent alarm at a central monitoring station. The crew's solution to this multi-million-dollar problem was almost insultingly low-tech. They arrived with rolls of custom-cut transparent plastic sheets. The process was nerve-wracking. One man would slowly, carefully unroll a sheet and hold it up in front of a sensor. The plastic was specially treated to be transparent to visible light, but opaque to the specific infrared wavelength the sensors used. It was like holding up an invisible shield. They had to cover every single sensor in their path without causing even a momentary break in the beam that would register as a fault. The dark humor of the situation wasn't lost on them. A few dollars worth of household-grade plastic was effectively blinding a state-of-the-art security system. It was a perfect demonstration of how a simple, clever workaround could defeat complex technology. With the sensors neutralized, they moved through the building like ghosts. The path was now clear, but it led directly to the heart of the operation, the vault door itself. This was no ordinary door. It was a masterpiece of security engineering, a 3-ton slab of steel that was considered unpickable. The light sensors were just the opening gambit. The real test of their skills and their audacity was about to begin. They had silenced the electronic eyes, but the door was a different kind of beast altogether, protected by physical mechanisms that required a completely different approach. This door was the centerpiece, the final boss of the entire operation. It wasn't just a barrier. It was a 3-ton statement of absolute security, a slab of steel so formidable it seemed to mock the very idea of unauthorized entry. It was protected by a series of locks, each more complex than the last. There was a standard key lock, a combination lock, and a magnetic lock that sealed the door with the force of a bank vault. The magnetic lock was the true guardian, and it was supposed to be fail-safe, engaging with a powerful electromagnetic seal when the door closed. But the crew had come prepared with tools that looked like they belonged in a master watchmaker's workshop, not a burglary. These weren't crowbars and sledgehammers. They were custom-made devices, engineered over months specifically to manipulate this one door's unique mechanisms. The lockpicker, the artist of the group, went to work. His task was to defeat the magnetic lock without triggering its internal alarm system. The irony here is almost too perfect. To break into a vault designed to protect diamonds, you need the patience and precision of a diamond cutter. He couldn't see the internal tumblers. He had to work by feel and by sound, listening for the faintest clicks and sensing the subtlest vibrations through his tools. It was a painstaking process, a high-stakes game of manipulation that took hours. He wasn't forcing anything, he was convincing the lock to open. The sound of the magnetic seal disengaging wasn't a dramatic clang, but a soft, almost imperceptible sigh. That was the moment. The door, this symbol of impenetrable security, had yielded not to brute force, but to pure applied skill. The unpickable had been picked. With the door now free, they faced their next, and perhaps most bizarre challenge. They had silenced the electronic eyes and picked the ultimate lock. But the vault itself had one final, deeply clever line of defense. It wasn't designed to keep people out, but to detect anyone who managed to get in. The security architects had installed seismic detectors, sensitive vibration monitors that could distinguish between the normal settling of a building and the footfalls of an intruder. Normal movement would trigger the alarm instantly. The crew knew this. Their reconnaissance had revealed everything. So they developed a technique that bordered on the absurd. They had to move in an exaggerated, theatrical slow motion, placing each foot with the delicacy of someone walking on a floor made of eggshells. They couldn't afford a single misstep. The psychological toll of this was immense. Imagine the pressure. You're standing in a room containing a fortune, but you have to move as if you're in a dream, where every action takes 10 times longer than it should. For hours, they were ghosts in the machine, their presence masked not by invisibility, but by an almost impossible level of physical control. They had deceived the technology by becoming less than human, reducing their movements to a glacial pace that fell below the system's threshold for alarm. The path to the deposit boxes was finally truly clear. The payoff was just a few painstakingly slow steps away. But getting the vault door open was only half the battle. Inside awaited what was arguably the most sophisticated defense of all, a network of seismic detectors. These weren't motion sensors. They were vibration monitors so sensitive they could theoretically distinguish between the normal creaking of an old building and the distinct frequency of human footsteps. The security philosophy was brilliant. It didn't matter if you bypassed every lock if the very floor could feel you walking. Normal movement, even cautious steps, would create vibrations that would instantly trigger a silent alarm. The crew knew they had to move not like thieves, but like phantoms. So they developed a technique that was as psychologically grueling as it was physically demanding. They had to adopt an exaggerated, almost theatrical slow motion. Each foot was placed with excruciating care, rolling from heel to toe with a slowness that defied human instinct. They couldn't talk. They couldn't drop a tool. A single cough or a heavy breath could be enough to register on the sensitive equipment. The irony is palpable. After using such high-level technical skill to breach the door, their success now depended on reducing themselves to near immobility. They were performing a bizarre, high-stakes ballet in the dark, where the price of a misstep was not a stumble, but a life-changing prison sentence. For hours, they inched their way through the vault, their progress measured not in feet per minute, but in inches. The sheer mental focus required was immense, a test of patience under pressure that few could withstand. Finally, they reached the prize, the wall of 123 individual safety deposit boxes. This is where the operation shifted from a technical challenge to a logistical one. They weren't there to cherry-pick the best boxes that would leave evidence of which dealers to investigate and potentially leave behind forensic clues. Their plan was a clean sweep. Take everything. It was a decision born of cold, professional logic. An empty vault is a mystery. A half-empty vault is a clue. The work was methodical and surprisingly physical. Using their custom lockpicking tools, they began systematically opening every single box. It wasn't a frantic grab. It was an assembly line of theft. One man would pick the lock, another would empty the contents into a bag, and a third would sort and organize the haul. They weren't just dealing with loose diamonds. There were polished gems, rough stones, jewelry, gold, and cash. The volume was staggering. They had brought duffel bags, and they quickly filled them. The sheer weight of the loot became a problem in itself. They had to make multiple trips from the vault to their getaway vehicle, a nondescript van parked nearby. Each trip was another nerve-wracking journey past the neutralized sensors and through the silent building. Imagine the scene. Men moving like slow-motion ghosts, carrying bags containing a king's ransom, past multi-million-dollar security systems that had been rendered blind and deaf by a few clever tricks. They worked through the night, and by the time the sun began to rise on that Saturday morning, the vault was empty. They had achieved the impossible. They had successfully stolen over $100 million without leaving a single trace of forced entry. The vault door was closed and relocked behind them. As far as the security system was concerned, nothing had happened. The perfect crime was, for a few glorious days, complete. The only evidence of their presence was the absence of everything that had been inside. They had become ghosts, and they vanished back into the city, leaving behind a mystery that would take weeks to unravel. The perfect crime lasted exactly 2 weeks. The crew had defeated every technological barrier, but they were undone by the most mundane of human errors. Near the crime scene, investigators found a half-eaten sandwich wrapper carelessly discarded in a roadside ditch. It seemed insignificant at first, just litter. But this was Belgium, and the police had a secret weapon, a national DNA database that was far more extensive than those in most other countries. They tested the saliva on the wrapper. The results were a direct hit. The DNA matched a known criminal in the system, a man with connections to the Italian underworld. This single piece of biological evidence was the thread that, when pulled, began to unravel the entire operation. The irony is almost too perfect. A heist that required the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a monk was ultimately cracked because someone got hungry and didn't properly dispose of their lunch. The multi-million-dollar planning, the custom tools, the months of reconnaissance, all of it was compromised by a simple act of carelessness. The ghost heist suddenly had a very real, very identifiable fingerprint. That DNA match triggered an international manhunt that led investigators straight to Leonardo Notarbartolo and his crew in Italy. Arrests followed, and the story of the impossible heist became a sensational trial. In the end, justice was served, but it was a partial victory. Authorities managed to recover only a small fraction of the loot, estimated to be less than 10% of the total haul. The vast majority of the diamonds, the fruits of their technically perfect crime, simply vanished into the shadowy global market, never to be seen again. The real legacy of the Antwerp heist wasn't in the convictions, but in the seismic shift it forced upon the entire diamond industry. The event was so audacious, so flawlessly executed up to that final mistake, that it served as the ultimate stress test for security protocols worldwide. The Diamond Center, and facilities like it, underwent a complete overhaul. They didn't just add more cameras or stronger locks, they rethought their entire philosophy. Human factor vulnerabilities were scrutinized. Weekend procedures were rewritten from scratch. The very design of new vaults began to incorporate the lessons learned from this one spectacular failure. The heist, in a strange way, created a more secure environment for everyone, except, of course, for the men who inspired the upgrades. The final irony of the Antwerp diamond heist is that its technical perfection was its ultimate undoing. The crew's belief that they had planned for every contingency made them blind to the simplest of mistakes. Their legacy is a paradox. They executed one of the most brilliant heists in history, yet they proved that no plan is foolproof against human fallibility. That's the price of perfection. If you found the sheer audacity of this operation fascinating, you should see the story of the man who sold the Eiffel Tower. Subscribe to Masterminds for more true tales of impossible crimes.